We have all played the Bloody Mary game. Go into a bathroom all alone and then say Bloody Mary 3 times in the dark. Then get disappointed when you don't get murdered because you had a huge paper due tomorrow. Classic, right? But we also wonder who was this Mary and why is she so mad at the world? Big Factz is here to spill the tea in its latest episode, The Real Bloody Mary. So, the real Bloody Mary was a queen. Yeah, surprisingly. More specifically, she was a murderous English queen. And she was bat crazy. She was also the first woman to rule England in her own right, which couldn't happen simply through inheritance. She had to seize it in ruthless ways. The first woman to rule England in her own right didn't simply inherit the throne. She seized it with unprecedented ambition from those who sought to thwart her. But a little backstory to this villain. Bloody Mary was born in 1516 to Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, 2 people who desperately wanted a son and were quite disappointed at the birth of a girl. Her teenage years were nothing exciting, just a disgusting amount of wealth and adoration from the public, until her father decided to divorce Catherine and marry Anne Boleyn. Yeah, it was that Henry. Suddenly, she was downgraded and denounced by everyone because she wouldn't acknowledge her father's rule. When Anne Boleyn was murdered, she was welcomed back into court. A little history lesson. England has divided into 2 parts at this point, Catholics and Protestants. As you will see, Mary really hated Protestants. So it really irked her when her half-brother, the heir to the throne, became Protestant and left the crown to Jane Grey, another Protestant. Mary was presented with a choice. She could either go to her relative in Europe, or she could remain in England and fight for her crown. So she chose to fight. She rallied support from nobles all across the country and marched to London. She won. But that didn't mean that her rule was anything less than incredibly challenging. She had a myriad of problems, including proving to the people that she was equal to any king. There was also the matter of Protestants who hated her. She solved that problem by living up to her name, Bloody Mary, and having 280 Protestants burnt at the stake. Most controversially, she ordered 280 Protestants burnt at the stake as heretics, a fact that would later cement her reputation as Bloody Mary. The Queen was quite forward in her reforms as well. She laid down all the groundwork for financial reforms, exploration, and naval expansions. On top of these were the efforts of her celebrated successor, Elizabeth I. But just after 5 years, Mary died of ovarian cancer. Before England broke away from Rome in 1534, a major ruling force was the Catholic Church. Henry made the decision to form the Church of England and to denounce the Roman Catholic Church. This wreaked havoc on the people. There was an uprising with 30,000 people taking up weapons and protesting this denouncement. They banned feasting, and holy days were canceled. They also tortured members of the clergy. Imagine taking up the throne as the first female ruler in these times, particularly so because she was a Catholic. She made many attempts to restore the old church order, but historians claim that this effort was overshadowed by her marriage to Philip of Spain, as people associated every single one of her moves with Spanish influence. Naturally, when she came into power, a lot of people simply fled England. That was a very good idea, because the people who did stay behind were met with a horrible fate, being burnt alive. To all the softies, this punishment seems brutal and animalistic. But in Tudor England, bloody punishment were very common. Being burnt at the stake was less horrifying than being boiled alive or being drawn and quartered. Not surprisingly, it would take a lot to shock the average 16th century citizen. Why was Mary seen as being too harsh when her father and his predecessors carried out a similar punishment? In short, sexism. This was the first woman to rule England, and people would not make it easy for her at all. Still, Mary and her advisors hoped that burning of these Protestants would act as a swift and quick shock to the other Protestants and force them to stop opposing her rule. She held a huge meeting of sorts in 1515 and explained her motives so that the people would not riot. The Queen explained that the people should view this punishment as lesson for those wanted to support the Protestants. But she said that this action was taken without hostility. Yeah, right. What she didn't expect was the Protestants to be crazily devoted to their newfound ways of life, where they could actually divorce people. They were prepared to die rather than go back to the old ways of life. We can't exactly blame them. Where was the religious tolerance? Nowhere to be found. In the mid-16th century, the entire concept of respecting other people's beliefs was laughable, but also because it wasn't just a struggle for belief, it was a political struggle. If the Protestants rose above, Mary would have been boiled alive herself. In such an environment, it wasn't surprising that Mary became bloody indeed. But even with the title, the only proof of her so-called cruelty was the burning of the 280 Protestants. Again, this seems horrifying to us, but it was very common to burn people alive back then. These executions are the main reason that every horrible nickname for her was formed, including flesh-eating zombie. She's even called one of the evilest humans of all time. People even accused her of losing her mind and descending into raging madness, then open tyranny. Guess what a 16th century writer wrote about her? He said, "She swimmeth in the holy blood of most innocent, virtuous, and excellent personages." Trust us, a monarch is innocent enough with their body count in the hundreds. Let us compare her to the previous very much celebrated rulers of England. Her father, Henry VIII, admittedly only burned 81 people at the stake during his long 31 years of ruling. But this burning was the only punishment he used sparingly. Estimates, while they may be exaggerated, suggest that he ordered deaths of as many as 57,000 to 72,000 of his own people, including 2 of his wives. King Edward VI wasn't so opposed to burning people either. 2 radical Protestant Anabaptists were tied to the stake and burnt alive during his 6-year reign. And in 1549, he ordered that an uprising be stopped, which resulted in a staggering 5,000 deaths, a bloodbath. Mary's celebrated and revered successor burned 5 Anabaptists at the stake during her 45-year reign, ordered 800 Catholics to be killed due to the revolts, and had at least a further 183 Catholics be hung, drawn, and quartered after they were labeled as traitors. Yeah, so it's clear that this 280 number is not the reason behind the Bloody Mary title. Because if it is, then why aren't there family members named Bloody Henry, Bloody Edwards, and Bloody Elizabeth? Why has she been singled out to carry this myth and legacy of Bloody Mary, who haunts England and its bathrooms too apparently? Historians have been perplexed as to find out what Mary did that was so different from the other kings and queens of her time. Well, it's not such an easy question, and it's not going to be a very easy answer. There are recurring themes that we can identify. First of all, as we mentioned, she was the first queen in England to rule as a king might, so she faced the same challenges that women in the workforce face: lack of subject loyalty, and their doubts that a woman could successfully govern anything, much less a country. This dilemma can be best summarized by a quote from a female leader we cannot remember. "A woman is never feared or respected as a man is, whatever is his rank. All she can do is shoulder the responsibility for the mistakes committed by others." And that was very much true in Mary's case, and it is very much true today. Almost every historian who has studied Bloody Mary has said that this queen and her descriptions have misogynistic themes. She is blamed at the same time for being too harsh or for being too weak. People hated her for suppressing Protestants and not showing them mercy. Then they hated her for sparing many political prisoners and taking her husband's advice, even if she didn't really need to. Her marriage to the Spaniard was definitely a bad political move. According to historians, people of England only trusted a few people, and the trusted group did not include Spaniards. So this marriage painted her as being a weak and infatuated woman who placed the love of her life over the best interest of the country that she ruled. It was not very fair. And it is definitely because she was a woman. This played the main role in forming her image, and this formation started in her own lifetime. Plus, as people started to reject Catholicism, they naturally rejected its biggest supporter. A writer, John Factz, wrote a book known as Mary of Martyrs, which played a pivotal role as convincing the English that their national identity was the Protestant identity. It wrote in detail the torments that those 280 people suffered at Mary's hands. All of these are word-of-mouth accounts and illustrations by people who were supposedly there. It became such a popular book that it was placed in every public setting. This literally shaped Mary's entire legacy for the next 450 years. Children grew up in many generations thinking that their first female ruler was a weak-willed tyrant named Bloody Mary. As you might have noticed, that her rule was not something very extraordinary if not for her gender. She might have actually been dismissed as being not important if that John Factz guy didn't write a whole book about how horrible she was. Coming back to her biggest act, the burning, it did not work. It just alienated a lot of people. It was a lesson for Elizabeth, who took care not to replicate her policies. Although she did disembowel Catholics. Was she any better than Bloody Mary? Comment below and we'll pin the best one. Like this video and share it with everyone you know. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. This was Big Facts, bombifying your mind, one video at a time.